Okay, decided I'd go ahead and do number 21 as well. I'll do 21 and 24 in this video. So on problem number 21, we want to make sure that we're in the right format. Is the coefficient of x squared equal to 1? It sure is. Is the equation in the right sequence? It's not. The minus 4 needs to come to the other side. So I'm going to write this as x squared minus 2x, having the x squared and x term on one side, leave a space, equals, this is now going to be positive 4, and then I'm going to compensate the same way over on the right hand side. Okay. Now I want to complete the square, so I'm going to do steps 3 through 5. So I'm going to take half of technically negative 2, but it really doesn't matter whether you do the negative because we're going to square it and it's going to become positive every single time. So half of negative 2 is technically negative 1. And then we're going to square negative 1, which is going to get you positive 1. So we're going to add 1 to this side, and whatever you do to the left, you have to do to the right. Okay, now we're ready to go ahead and factor. So this is going to factor into binomial squared. So what times itself gets you x squared? That would be x. Since the middle term's negative, the sign's going to be minus. And then what number times itself gets you 1? That's 1. On the right side, combine this together, you get 5. Now we're ready to take the square root. Take the square root to the left. Square and square root cancel. You're left with x minus 1 equals, take the square root of the right side, and that's going to get you positive or negative square root of 5. Okay. Now you can't reduce the square root of 5, so we're just going to leave that. So the last step, we're going to solve. We're just going to bring the 1 over. So x equals, and typically if you're left with a square root here or an I here, normally I put the number out in front so you can decide whether it's under the square root or not. So we're going to add 1, so it's going to become positive, plus or minus square root of 5. Okay? So there's your answer for number 21. Okay? Now on the last one, we're going to look at number 24. Now this one's going to get a little trickier because the numbers are not going to come out as nice. And we'll see why here in a minute. So let's make sure we're in the right form. Is the coefficient of x squared 1? It is. Is the equation in the form x squared plus bx equals c? Well, we've got the x squared and x term on one side. And again, we have the 0. We don't have a non-zero term. We just have a 0. So that's fine. We'll just leave that. So now we're ready to complete the square. So this is going to be x squared plus 5x. We're going to come up with that third term equals 0, and then we're going to compensate for that third term over there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take half. We're going to complete the square, take half, in this case, of 5. Well, that one doesn't come out as nice. So half of 5 is actually 5 halves, or 2.5 if you list it as a decimal. And then what do we have to do to that? We need to square that. So if you square 5 halves, well, that's 5 halves times 5 halves, so 5 times 5, that's 25 over 2 times 2, that's 4. So that's 25 fourths. Now if you write it as a decimal, 2.5 squared is actually 6.25. Okay? I'm going to write it as 25 over 4. So this is plus 25 fourths. And if you add 25 fourths to one side, then you have to add 25 fourths to the other side. Okay? So now we're ready to factor. So this should be a binomial squared. So what times itself gets you x squared? That's x. Since the signs are both positive, this is plus. Now what times itself gets you 25 fourths? Well, that's 5 halves. Okay? And then that equals, this just gets you 25 fourths. Okay? And now we're ready to take the square root. Take the square root of this side. Square and square root cancel. It leaves you with x plus 5 halves equals, take the square root of this side. Well, take the square root of the top. You get 5. Take the square root of the bottom. You get 2. And that's plus or minus. Now we just need to bring the 5 halves over. So x equals positive or negative 5 halves minus 5 halves when you bring this over to the other side. So let's simplify this. Positive 5/2 minus 5/2, that's just 0. And your other solution, negative 5/2 minus 5/2, that's going to be negative 10/2, which is actually equal to negative 5. Okay, so you've got x equals 0 and x equals negative 5. And you see, the reason why that happened on this one was we took half of an odd number, so we got a fraction or a decimal. Okay. All the other problems that we did, we took half of 2, came out to a nice number. Took half of 12, got a nice number. Took half of 4, got a nice number. Okay. So that's a couple examples from your homework.